It's 2:30, and we'll wait on Bill and Gail.
Sorry, we're just trying to.
You discussing a legal expense for the grant and aid program.
All right.
Right.
Now, I want to say thank you for coming. You know, I love an audience. And thank you for being here with whatever that is. Is that an iPhone?
It's an Android.
It's a very sophisticated piece of equipment. Make sure you get all these good-looking people here.
See, redistribution rates, we charge for those.
Yeah. Redistribution rates. So since we are being filmed, you all have to consent to being filmed. Because he probably doesn't want to take your picture, but if he does, you're consenting to that. And you'll find yourself all on some porn site. That's not what we're going to do.
Well, they're gonna lose money that day.
Yeah. Don't do this table over here. I want to talk a little bit about grant and aid. Grant and aid system. Does everybody know what the grant and aid system is? No one knows, so I'll tell you.
It's aid by.
What is your version?
Yeah.
The gospel truth is a mechanism, grant and aid is a mechanism, statutory mechanism, by which snowmobile trails throughout the state of Minnesota are constructed and maintained. The state of Minnesota cannot give, and they have money. The state has money. Whose money is it? Your money. So we're talking about how do they allocate this money? Can they give the money to us? No. That's what we call a private inurement, which is unconstitutional. But what they do is give the money to local units of government. The state, through the DNR, gives a lot of money to a local unit of government. And there are terms and conditions the local unit of government has to abide by. The local government, in turn, enters into a second contract with the Snowmobile Club to do the work, to construct and maintain a snowmobile trail or snowmobile trails. That is the grant and aid system according to Woody and I.
Question. I mean, for Otter Country, our sponsor is Otter Tail County.
Yes, that's a local unit of government.
Okay, so
counties, cities, municipalities, townships.
why do they gotta give that to them? Why can't they give it right to the club? Or is there something that's not supposed to be done?
Short answer is the law says that's how it has to be done.
Mhm.
The complicated answer, you know, I like things complicated, is it's a constitutional problem. It means you can't use public funds for private use. So even though we are doing it for the building, constructing, maintaining the trails for public benefit, technically writing a check to Woody, which is always a dangerous proposition, is unconstitutional because it's private benefit to that club.
But it's okay to give it to your sponsor and then the sponsor to turn around and do that.
Right. And the first thing you need to know is there are two contracts involved there. A contract between the state and the local unit of government. They can't do whatever they want with the money. No such thing as a free lunch. And then the club has a contract with the local unit. So the local unit of government doesn't have quite the same private inurement because it's a benefit in that area for that public. Do you really want to know about the constitutional analysis? Nah.
No.
Okay, we only have an hour.
Why is it any more legal for the local unit, any more constitutional for the local unit of government to contract with then it will
I
come
will
from the
talk to
state.
you later about that. We've got an answer to that, and these guys don't wanna hear it.
Okay.
Okay, that's how the grant and aid works. The key to that, and that's not the title of this presentation, this seminar, this conversation, is not what is grant and aid. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, it is what is the legal expenditure under grant and aid? What can you do once you get the money and stay within the four corners of the law? Is that right? Well, if that's the question, let's look at the law. I love posing for pictures. It's Minnesota statute 8483, subdivision 3. Now, it's real clear. I will tell you, I'll give you a brief summary. The funds in the dedicated account, there's some state trails, enforcement, that stuff we're not worried about today, can be used for a grant and aid system to construct and maintain snowmobile trails. Now, if you guys wanna go to the pool, that's the end of the presentation. Or, that's all there is. We can dig into it a bit, because there are more things. Now, as a lawyer, if you look at a statute, and it seems kind of vague, like, what is construction? What is labor? Well, you get people, that's labor. Means you can pay them if you want. You got construction, what is construction? Well, that's building something. These people building something, using materials. That's construction and labor. However, no big project is done with just that. You have design, you have compliance, there's a lot more to it, what construction and labor is. Now, I'm gonna do a quick parenthetical. Does that mean you should construct a new trail or do all your trail work with paid employees or paid contractors? I would say that's a very, very bad idea. And we'll get back to that later. It's probably within the four corners of the law, but a bad, bad idea. So we know how it's funded. Your money goes to the state passes it to the local unit of government, the local unit of government gets it to you for the purpose of building snowmobile trails and maintaining snowmobiles, construction and maintenance. And digging into those words is kind of hard, because I found the statute very, very ambiguous. So I looked at the regulations. Has anybody looked at the regulations?
Years ago.
The state has regulations talking about what's legal and not legal. No, they don't. There are no regulations have the, agency regulations have the force of law, but there is nothing, there are no DNR regulations on how you spend the money. So it's no wonder Greg's confused. He's got that glazed look, he said, this is gonna be bad. So what do they have? They have publications from DNR, guidelines, and they have a manual. Has everyone seen their manual? Who has not seen their manual? Huh? Everybody seen the manual? And if you haven't, let me know, I'll email you a copy. That's not helpful. That doesn't tell you what you can and cannot do with the money. So we are gonna have to unpack that. And you can ask me questions, and I can ask you, and I will ask you questions. Let's start out. Well, Eddie, is that a fair way to start? Okay? Let's say we want to build a snowmobile trail. We want to construct and maintain a snowmobile trail what do we have to be? We have to be a 501c3 snowmobile club.
No,
For
you have to be Minnesota nonprofit.
Minnesota
Snowmobile clubs
nonprofit,
are-
it's not the tax, it's the nonprofit, correct me. It is, you have to be nonprofit. And by the way, that's how you get around this. The private enrollment issue you raised. You have to be that, and you have to enter into a contract. And in the manual, we have, of course, performance-based, system now. And we've had that for a number of years, and generally, I think people like it a lot better than what we used to have. Some of the gray hairs and no hairs within this, remember the days before. With the paperwork was colossal, and, payments were delayed, and it didn't work. It was very tight accounting from DNR, they looked very closely at all this stuff, they say, but it was an awful lot of work. So MinUSA took the lead, convinced the state, DNR and the legislature, that the performance grants are the way to go. Essentially, give us a pile of money, we'll do the job. If there's too much money, we still get to keep it. If there's not enough money, we still have to do the work. That's performance grants. And the theory under that is that year to year it levels out. If you get a brownout winter, you still get your grant. If you get 2 feet of snow twice a week, 5 times a week, for the entire winter, you still gotta do the work. That's performance-based. Now, under the manual, you have to see, as you know benchmarks, you have to say, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna build a trail here. As you go through, there's 4 pieces of accountability, and you get paid 4 times. Okay? It's not quite as wide open as you think, because within the manual and the paperwork you do have to do, you have to tell them what you're gonna do and what you've done. So there is that accountability. And still, if you guys go out and buy a groomer, keep the receipt. Or at least have the groomer when the DNR shows up. Because you can be audited. And we've had one system under the performance-based, audited and found wanting. Jackson County, wasn't that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you still have to do your accounting, and you have to be business-like. You have to run this as a business. Just as a construction company, will do a fixed price contract, you're doing a fixed price contract. And yet, the person you're contracting with, the people of Minnesota acting through their state legislature and executive branch, wanna make sure you're doing it right. So you know you all have to keep records of what you do, right? Okay, no news, no reason to be here yet, you know all this. Let's get down to this. Let's say we want to build a trail. I have to map it out. I can lock it, or I can get, Dick to come in and plot out the trail for me. Cause he's an expert at plotting out trails. He knows this stuff. Can I pay him? Is that an allowable expense to use my grant?
Should be.
Right, I got some yeses, any no's? Yeah, sure. Why not? Can I rent a D8 Caterpillar go push through the forest
Yes.
to build that trail.
Yeah, they know.
Right, you have permits to do it.
Yeah, we're assuming all the permits are there, it's all good. The cost of getting permits. Yeah, the work we gotta do, the reimbursement for getting the permit. Let's go back to that D8 cat. I have a particular affection for that because that knocks stuff down really good. And I like that destructive stuff. Well, you can rent it, you can probably even, can you pay an operator or you have to do it yourself?
Operator.
You can pay out, it's gonna get harder as we go along. Can you buy the cat?
No.
Why?
Yeah.
Yes, they could, right?
But you have to show it's going to be used for that traffic.
Let's just say it's gonna take me 2 months to construct the trail, or at least to clear the area. How much does a D8 cat cost?
250.
Okay, which brings us to the next piece. Paul, who I'm very excited to have, being with DNR now, used the words prudence. Be prudent, be reasonable. And I will use the words common sense. Reasonable and prudent are legal terms. But I think it's the same thing as common sense, doing what you're supposed to do and staying within the law. Okay? So is it reasonable or prudent to spend $150,000 on a D8 Caterpillar for 2 months or 2 weeks, whatever it may be, clearing a path?
No.
And how many people use a D8 cat as a groomer? Probably.
Seriously?
Technically possible. And which again, is it reasonably imprudent, should you use a D8 cat as a groomer? To say, well, I'm gonna use it to knock down stuff for a week or 2 weeks, and then we're gonna groom our trails. Is that reasonable, prudent, businesslike? How many think it is? Okay, so, let's go back. We have a law that doesn't tell us much. We have no regulations, no guidance in the regulatory, and the manual really doesn't help that much. Common sense, so we've gotta really figure this stuff out for ourselves, and what we need to be with every expenditure for it to be allowable is to be reasonable and prudent with it. The same way if you were running it as a business. Okay? Maintaining, you obviously can get groomers, right? You can obviously pay someone to get out at midnight when it's 30 below to go out and spend an enjoyable night in the woods, right? That's good, that's easy, we're still getting easy. Can you build a shed to store that groomer with grant and aid money? How many think you can? How many think you can't? Actually, majority rules here, you can build a shed to store it. That's reasonable and prudent. You got an expensive piece of equipment there. Got a real expensive piece of equipment, you're gonna have to maintain it. And I don't think it's reasonable to say, well, it could sit outside all winter, and if it breaks down in the middle of winter, when it's cold and blizzardy, we'll just stay outside and fix it there. So far, put a pole barn in your mind, when I say a shed, a garage, a groomer garage, just a pole barn. You put a groomer or 2 in there, keep it secure. Yeah. Now, I've seen some groomer garages around the state that some of you people have built that are a little bit more than that. Yeah, man caves, clubhouses. Okay, can you say, since we've gotta put up this pole barn anyway, let's make it a little more permanent, make it, insulate it, make it a little more comfortable for everybody, particularly for those groomer drivers when we get in and out. Let's have a driver lounge for them, which, by the way, we may be able to use for our club meetings. Let's have a kitchen. Can you do that?
Kitchen's extreme.
Pardon?
The kitchen's too extreme. I think you can concrete it, you can insulate it, you can tin the walls, make it comfortable for maintenance, that's as far as you should go.
Okay, good answer.
Question, could you do the whole thing but allocate some of the funds for part of it, and the kitchen to borrow from other funds?
Let's go to that. Ah, you stole my thunder. That's exactly what they do. When you see those fancy ones, you've got that, and there's an allocation. The clubhouse portion is built generally with gambling funds. Right.
Can you use funds or part of fund, can you use funds for some or all of the land acquisition for said groomer shed?
Is it reasonable?
So you've gotta have land to put a building on,
Well, that's reasonable. Is it prudent?
if you don't want your groomer to sit outside.
Okay, that's good. So what do we think?
Yes.
Oh. Now, depends on where you are.
Fair enough. So then, bring me back.
Let's say if, you want to store your groomers on the shore of, Lake Minnetonka, you might have a problem, cause that's real expensive land. When you're siting a groomer shed, what controls are, where's the trail, for example? Where's access to fuel? Those types of things, this is the land, and that's fine.
Well, so it begs the question, that is your main question, what's reasonable and prudent? And I guess in an audit situation, would it be the DNR who has the final say, is if that's reasonable and prudent, right? From a legal perspective, who gets to make the determination? I'm a metro club, so obviously my land's gonna be more expensive now. If I'm on the trail, if I'm next to fuel, there are certainly spots in my area that would not be reasonable and prudent, but there are some that someone might say, well, that's kind of, is that the right spot? Who ultimately, if someone's questioning that, gets to be the judge of what's reasonable and prudent?
Well, that would be generally the Commissioner of Natural Resources. And the reason is they can hold the money. They could say, no, we're not gonna give you any money, Mike, you're not reasonable, you're not prudent. It's in the contracts, out of contract. If you do it fraudulently, that would be another agency of government that would come after you, that I finally refer to as the police, or the sheriff, or the county attorney. So, let's stay back on we've got the land, we've got let's say we've got a combination clubhouse garage. You've got a kitchen, you've got shower, you've got a lounge. Let's say the lounge is 40 by 40 feet.
Nice.
With a 70-inch TV and surround sound. And next to the bathroom, because that's sitting in that groomer all night is so hard on a guy or a woman, you need a jacuzzi bath. Why not? We're going for it. Can you do that with grant and aid money?
No.
Can you have a fundraiser get Mike a jacuzzi?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Source of,
Gambling,
pardon?
unless you have gambling.
That's right, you have gambling. And,
I don't know, can we
almost,
use gambling money for a How come?
Almost,
You can't have a fundraiser if you have gambling.
yeah. Yeah, and I wanna talk about gambling and, in a minute. But, do you see where I'm going with these pieces? What is reasonable and necessary to build and maintain a snowmobile trail? What would a reasonably prudent person do? The truth is, as I say, and I've said before, this money comes out of your pocket. This is our money. But legally, it's not. All of the money in the dedicated fund is public funds. And as a contractor with the local unit of government and the DNR, you have a stewardship obligation, excuse me. You have to be a good steward of those funds with your expenditures. If you build a bridge, of course. If it goes somewhere, can you buy a drag? Yeah. And the piece we get for some of these large expenditures, be it land, D8 Caterpillar, not so much a groomer, but is it more reasonable to lease rather than rent? Do a ground lease. In some cases, you may wanna do that instead of buy the property. Generally not, but it's possible. Over in Europe, everybody owns their own flat or house. Generally, they don't own the land. They have 100-year ground leases that are renewed every 100 years. So, I mean, that's a possibility too, and a lot of buildings are built with ground leases. So you have to consider that. But is it, would you spend your money on this? Anything way out of line fancy is gonna draw their attention. Remember, there is accountability. You do have to keep records, you do have to keep receipts. So, here's one. Terry's club and all of your clubs do landowner appreciation. Dinners, barbecues, picnics. Could be hot dogs, could be Terry's famous chicken. Could be a steak fry. Can you use granted aid funds to pay the costs of your landowner appreciation event?
Yes.
Is it prudent and reasonable?
Good question, which leads me to another question. Argue that it is prudent and reasonable.
It's our chance to meet with the landowners who are giving us permission. We get to hear any issues they have with, current operations on their land. And as such, in order to make it easier for them to spend time with us, we're providing a reasonable meal, during that, meeting.
Good. I'll do it quicker. If you don't have permission, you don't have a snowmobile trail. It's necessary to construct and maintain it to keep your landlords happy. Landowners. Is it reasonable and necessary to contribute to the lobbyist retirement fund? All those that agree that it is, raise your hand with me. Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Veto collecting.
Yeah.
So does that mean MinUSA don't have to pay you anymore?
If the clubs pay me enough, I'll work that out with the new officers there.
Is it common sense to pay them?
Yeah, no.
Is it common, you are a heckler.
Technically, we do pay your retirement fund, because we pay your, since you're getting salary and using that salary to fund the retirement. So you could play it that way, but paying
Whoa.
directly in is an indirect contract, so no.
That's called.
NUSA does not have a contract with the local unit of government for the state of Minnesota to construct and maintain trails. So the money that I'm paid out of your dues. And so what you would have to do, if you are a reasonable and prudent person, go before the board and say, I want my dues raised so we can pay the lobbyists more. Okay, aside from that, we've got the landowners. Now, how about Stumpy? That's just kind of the piece. I wish I had something more definite. There are a lot of agencies that say, this is an allowable expense, this is not. This is an allowable expense, this is not. We don't have that. What we have is the agencies, the DNR's judgment that it's a reasonable and necessary expense. And those are two separate tests, reasonable and necessary. Renting, getting a cat in to do some clearing is a necessary expense. Not always, but when it is, it is. It's a necessary expense to create a trail. Buying the cat, is that reasonable? So reasonable and necessary, you have to meet both of those tests. Okay? Greg, I think Greg first had it.
What about, if you give your landowners, say, a gift card?
Gift card. I'm gonna write some of these down so we can talk about them, okay?
And you forgot your name, Doug.
Yeah. Sorry.
Exclamation point, comma, question mark.
Okay, that's good. Let's talk about gift cards. Can you do that? What do you guys think?
Yes.
I think so.
Swag?
Still have to have a landowner.
As long as it's reasonable and prudent.
Reasonable.
If the amount of the gift card is reasonable and prudent. the
You
amount
probably
is
can, but it's
fine.
not a good idea.
Pardon?
Probably can, but it's not a good idea.
Well, going back to common sense, if you have little swag bags, and like we got here when we registered, you have a MinUSA calendar and a little container of Martin Magic, is that what? Martin County Magic. Sure, it's nice, it's the thought that counts. If you have a bottle of $200 champagne in there that each landowner gets, Janet wants to be your landowner now.
Yeah.
That's not so reasonable.
$20 gift card compared to a $100 gift card.
$20 compared to 100, or, yeah, exactly. So again, is there a prohibition on gift cards? No. Now, is it a good idea? Let me go off topic for a minute. I would say, unless it is of nominal value, and for legislators, that's $5 or less. Okay? So you may be exposing the landowner to liability when the landowner is now immune from liability, tort liability, lawsuit, recreational liability statute, which simply says, if you're not familiar with it, if a landowner offers his land for use by the public, within the landowner can't be held liable in negligence. Barry?
Well, I think it would fall under, the saying that the gift card was worth no more than the dinner that you were providing, then it would be reasonable and proper.
Right. Is the cost of saying thank you to the landowner to build that relationship, or put a corporate spin on it, the marketing of your snowmobile club, is that reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the question is, how much are you spending per landowner? if it's symbolic, if it's really nice, if it's a, you know, $10 or $15 Target gift card, that's one thing. That's just a thank you, but be very careful so you do not expose them to losing their immunity under the recreational liability statute. Mike again.
Would it be considered reasonable and customary to use grant and aid money to promote said maintained and created trail, i.e. trail signage or, print marketing for an event or, something of the like? A club is having an event for the trail or a trail opening or trail something. Promoting the trail.
Promoting the trail. Good question. Now, signage, let's dispose of that. Can we use grant funds to purchase signs?
Yes.
Can we use grant funds to help us put them up?
Yes.
Okay, that's the signage.
So maybe
But we're
promoting
having,
advertising in another club's newsletter or magazine.
oh, say we're advertising, come to our trail.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to get a little sketchy. Are you, you know, in terms of promotion, and I think I triggered that by using the word marketing. Because DNR does promotion, if your local chamber does promotion, that type of thing. You know, if you're, let's say, having a Grand Trail opening and you wanna print up brochures at, Kinko's or FedEx and paste them in the cafe in town or whatever, sure. But that's different from getting a marketing, thing where you're taking ads out, paid ads for other people and that. Usually those things are best to get free media. Free media is the best media. Not only is it the cheapest, but generally it's, the best read. You're reaching your market. And Janet talked about the no trespassing. Is that today or yesterday? Today. Getting that in their newspaper, right? Make sure that you took a picture of trespasser, it's in the paper. How much did that cost you to put it in the paper?
Nothing.
Exactly. And probably that got a lot more attention than an ad would.
So flip it to modern day ad club website that we have trail maps on.
How much does that cost you?
I would say arbitrarily paying $100 a month.
For your club website?
Sure.
Can you, that's a close one. What do you guys think?
I think if you have your map on it, you have advertisement for your safety training classes and so on, I think it's reasonable and proper.
Anybody else?
I mean, $100 is very reasonable today from a hosting provider standpoint, right? The functionality you want on the website itself. Just say if you were a business and you were doing that, that is a reasonable number. It's not, it's actually cheap.
Does that assist in maintaining the trail?
Sure, because it tells you where they're at. So you have a way to communicate changes as the trail changes. You can keep it up to date in real time. You can put conditions out in real time.
Safety and
Safety.
education.
Good answer.
I think we have to have a map, don't we?
Yes, that's part of the GIA.
Part of the deal. The map is great, and you can get away with safety, but promoting your trail, no, that's different. That's neither construction nor maintenance.
Great area.
Communicating.
Communicating trail conditions
But
sounds
getting
good.
people there is not within that. I mean, you can do reasonable communications.
So pay for the site, but you can't pay Google search to send people to your site.
I think that's a good, what do you guys think? I would say, yeah, I would say you're absolutely correct.
It's a great area.
It's a gray area, and the reality is, on this topic, there's gonna be a lot of gray areas. And it depends on a lot of factors, like how much does it cost?
So what if you're in that site got maps, but I'm also managing my landowner contracts on that site and other things, right? I need a spot to store those permits electronically.
Just put them on your computer.
It's not secure, it's not backed up. What happens is my laptop gets dropped on the floor, you spilled drink on it tonight.
Cloud, the cloud.
Sure, I got paid for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's.
Quick, can you have a grant
Depends
aid?
on how much space you use in the cloud too.
Yeah.
You get it free so much.
Yeah. And you can get 50 gigabytes for 99 cents a month.
No question about it, but if I wanna integrate in other stuff, there's cost to that, so if I buy it all said and done from a provider, but I'm doing that in the creation and maintenance, just like I'm renting that D8, I'm renting this per month in terms of the cost of manpower of integration versus they have a turnkey solution for it.
Maybe?
You're probably going higher tech than any
Yeah.
clubs had too.
Sure, but kids today are higher tech. That's the
Oh,
other
we
part
have
of
a
it.
nephew who is, but he still tells us, don't put everything in the cloud.
I would always, in my business practice, I always keep a paper backup.
I think you have to for the DNR.
So you've got that, and you could try to get away with that. And that get away doesn't sound right. You could try that if you want, but I'd say most people just have it all on somebody's laptop. And can you drop the laptop? Sure. Can you back it up? Sure. Go to Best Buy.
So
50
what
bucks,
if it's
you
a
get
club
that.
laptop?
What?
Club laptop?
Yeah.
We have a club.
Okay, so what's the difference between a club laptop, physical, and a club laptop in the cloud?
Depends on how much it costs.
How much does a laptop cost?
Get one.
So what you want.
Right.
Depends on what you want to,
Basic.
what's necessary to do this job.
Right.
$1,000.
And at $100 a month,
$500.
that's $10 a month.
Hard?
And then that's 10 months at $100
Another
a month.
250, then you're talking
But it's
about.
always updated.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the kind of decision you have to make. And, it can't be because you like tech. It has to be what does the job at the best way at a reasonable price. The other factor in, that I keep thinking about, is if I start my own club, I can create a nonprofit in about 10 minutes. I do that, and we'll call it Doug's Snowmobile Club. And I decide I am going to construct and maintain 3 miles of trail, 5 miles of trail. How much will I get away with? And I will use get away because I'm talking to myself, expending money to buy computers and all of this other stuff.
Not very far.
Not very far. Now, if I have a trail that's 250 miles, my club, but a club maintains how much trail? A big one.
400.
400. Well, that's gonna be taken into consideration. You may need more, just as you may need more groomers. And, you know, I'll only need one D8 cat for my 3 miles.
And you can groom with it.
And I can groom with it. So it depends on the size of your business. It depends on how you could reasonably relate it, reasonably prudent, relate it to the construction and maintenance of the snowmobile trail. And the 2 tests, and this is nowhere in this law, but courts always use this, is it reasonable and is it necessary? Reasonableness, you have to weigh all the facts of your particular situation. Mike and Woody's situations may be completely different. Land in your area is more expensive than, in Mountain Iron, for example. They look at all of this stuff. Okay, we've done the gift cards. Anything else we wanna know about?
Quick question, can we use the same logic for the gift cards? In other words, if one landowner has 50 miles versus another one with 1 mile, and they wanna get the one 50 miles a little bit better gift card.
Right, I think that's not, is it legal, but does that make sense or not?
I think it does.
Yeah, except if I'm the one, if I'm the landowner that gets a $5 gift card and my neighbor, the landowner, the guy in the next farm, gets $100, I'm gonna be pissed off and I may no longer participate. That's a political thing, that's club politics.
That's why it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
We thought about that with our landowners, but some are single, some are married, so how do you
Right.
Just one, we just
So we
did one
didn't do it.
per landowner.
Right.
If you don't treat them equal, you have a chance of losing one that's small and your trails put.
Usually seems to be a random drawing for a couple gift cards, put all the landowners' names in a hat, there's 3 gift cards each year, and pull 3 names and that's who gets it.
Right. And I mean, there's good ways to do that, but that's a little off topic, it's a, like, different reason. Okay, David, you're gonna put things to test today.
So, one is, so the direct answer on the website, I see.
Solid club management software.
Club management
Club
software.
management software, sure, we should call it that.
I think that's a much cleaner way to look at that question as opposed to just a website.
Right.
If you're managing the entire list of landowners, you're managing and communication for the landowners, for the club members, it's much more of a management system than it is necessarily just a website.
And the cool thing about that is you can track your expenditures, you can enter them electronically and track your expenditures. Because you are accountable under the system for justifying those expenses, each and every one of them, if they ask, major expenses. Probably nobody's gonna ask about your gift cards. But, and you know, it's in the manual, it's the way they will look at it.
At the end of every year for our fiscal year for our club,
Yes,
I take all of our stuff to a private accounting firm and we do an audit. Every year.
that's prudent, and I would say in that case, you can pay for that private accounting firm out of your grant and aid funds. Because that's certainly reasonable and prudent.
Well, I mean, we just wanna make sure that, you know, everything's on the up and up, and it's just, and we don't do it in-house, we have a source.
Absolutely.
Is the accounting firm of Food Cheatham and Howe?
That's a law firm.
Doing different
Yeah, I like that, computer management software, you can track.
Club
your-
management.
Yeah, club management.
There's actually a category of that.
Okay.
There's about a dozen vendors that do that, and when you add up all the admin and the different lists you're maintaining and everything else,
Yeah.
it can actually be cost effective to charge.
What's it called?
The club management
Oh,
software.
that's Casey, you'll know.
You can use.
How many
club stuff. Okay,
subsections
let's
are-
move on from computers. We had a couple other questions, George, then Gail.
Oh, what about entertainment for landowner appreciation?
If you're talking about the backseat boogie band, absolutely. I'm very wary about
Says,
being,
say it's a band,
it's part of the expenses. It depends on which
Showing
band.
appreciation,
I mean, if you're spending $1,000 on entertainment for the night for landowner appreciation, is it?
Depends on how many landowners you appreciate.
I was gonna say, have Kansas come in. but I
In
don't
my
know if
three,
you roll it
in
out.
my 3-mile trail system I have,
Oh, you would do it.
well, yeah.
But if you got a couple hundred-
The question is, well, you know, can you make as part of the event? You know, there's reasonable, $1,000 for a band, yeah. Getting the Rolling Stones down here, not so much. They're playing tonight, by the way.
Yeah.
You're in the cities, wait, Scott, after Gail.
Okay, well, we have gambling, so we are paying someone to run bingo
Yes,
in an establishment. So 10% goes to gambling, and 90%, whatever the percentage is, goes to who's working bingo. The club that's working the bingo, 90, and the club gets 10 just for bookwork. So can the club, out of their grant aid, pay the club for running the bingo?
that's gambling funds you're talking about, right?
They're Yes, using
Commingled.
gambling funds for the bingo.
Whole different story.
That's a whole different subject, and let me answer it two ways. First, if you do it, talk to Woody's accountant, so you're documenting everything carefully. Because when you're dealing with charitable gambling, it's much more precise. And,
The gambling manager is telling us that she can't pay the club that's working the bingo because they're not a 501c3.
Bingo's a little different than OPEB though, so there's.
bingo's a little bit different, but still,
It's
it's
still
regulated, and that's a gaming question.
She still has to do the paperwork.
Yeah, you did probably more paperwork, much more paperwork. Yeah, you can check with them. The other thing, I went back and looked at the statute. Cause, I got snowmobiling in there a long time ago. And I can remember the small smoke-filled room I did it in, and who I did it with. A Twin City liberal who liked to smoke, just added snowmobiling to permissible expenditures for gaming funds. But it says DNR authorized expenditures for snowmobiles. That's what the law says. So you might wanna ask the DNR about that technically, because I think most folks that have gambling don't check with the DNR first. So that's a technical non-compliance if you don't. But I do not pretend to know anything about gambling except statistically, if you're a gambler, you will lose. And that's enough. That's all you ever know about gambling, that's enough. Okay, let's see, Scott, then Rick.
So I know social hour starts at 6, but let's talk about alcohol.
Alcohol.
So Doug's got his 3 miles of trails, and Doug says, I can't handle putting these trails in, Scott, so why don't you come help me put the trails in?
And I'll give you a case of beer.
And we go out after putting the trails in, the snowmobile trails, and get them all done. And maybe Woody comes along, and Janet too, and we go to a bar, and we buy alcohol and burgers and more alcohol, and write a check out of the Doug's Snowmobile Club account to pay for the alcohol.
I have an answer, but I wanna hear your answer first.
Okay, so, I don't wanna tell it, no, okay, I'll tell it. So what we do is, we tell the bartender to put it down as pop.
Wow.
Can I change
$6
your
a
facts a
glass?
little bit?
Yeah.
Barley hop.
It's,
Alcohol is not, it's pretty much different.
yeah, you could go, yes, say that again, Sherry.
Food is allowable, but the alcohol is not, so you have to have it on 2 different tabs. Cause you can get paid back or write that check out of those funds, but you cannot pay for the alcohol through those funds.
Why not?
Cause Bowser says we can't.
Not necessary.
Bowser says we can't.
Now, I don't drink alcohol, but non-alcoholic. Having said that, I think if it's reasonable and prudent for a landowner to buy he or she a cocktail, that should be included.
Well, you're showing.
But the government doesn't agree with me.
Yeah.
And listen to them before you listen to me.
We were told 0 alcohol. They have a 0 tolerance for any type of alcohol.
And not that it's not in a given situation reasonable and necessary, but it is so easy to abuse that. And it's so hard to enforce that. So I think it, actually, the 0 tolerance is pretty reasonable if you think about that from that way. Now, at your landowner picnic, do you have beer?
Yes.
Depends who pays for it.
Yes,
Pardon?
Depends who's paying for it.
Well, who pays for it?
club account.
It comes out of your grant money.
Our
No.
landowner
Not the
pays
alcohol
more.
fund, it's different accounts.
Well,
Yeah.
that's,
Our landowners pay for their own. We don't pay for it.
yeah.
So what's the real answer on that? Can you put a case of
Yeah,
beer
but
cooler
we
at the picnic
Yeah,
or no?
that's what we did, we get, well, somebody donated.
I would say, yes, but I'm not sure what the government would say about that, because, you know, the reality in Scott's facts he gave, it was worse than that, it was a strip club. Yeah.
Wow. Was it trailside?
Pardon?
Trailside?
No, no.
So they weren't landowners?
It was on the wrong side of town. And no, Janet was not dancing.
Thank you.
We just elected a president.
We'll talk about that next.
You need clarity on that.
Yeah.
There are some things that they will tell you, and listen to them, because I think they may be wrong. I think you should be able to give a landowner a beer under controlled circumstances at the landowner picnic. It's best if it's donated or people pay for it out of their pocket as opposed to grant aid. That's the easiest way to do it. And don't get that much. And also, if you are serving alcohol, remember, there's liability attached to serving alcohol. And minors, serving intoxicated people, etc. You may find your clout in a world of hurt.
And read your insurance policy,
Read your insurance policy.
because that, ours is a absolutely zero tolerance in alcohol. We were told if we had an event and there was alcohol served, they would drop us.
What if it's not served and it's BYOB? Do you get around it that way?
Well, that's not a question for, I don't know if you wanna talk about this, fine, but it's not, if you're,
It's not
if
there.
it's BYOB, it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Now, you could also having, since we're on the divergence from the subject, you can also get a dram shop temporary insurance policy from the, from the Joint Underwriting Association.
No, I know a club, the Shriner Club, and for them to serve alcohol at certain events, they had to go a bartending school for their insurance
That-
too.
That is, you get a permit.
Right. So, it's best to
Send somebody
stay
from your
away
club to
from
bartending school
supplying
and pay for it with
alcohol
GIA money.
as a club.
Or hire a bartender.
Hire a bartender,
Business, yeah.
cash
With
bars.
other employees.
Because in fact, most landowners can live,
Mostly drunks and all from the west side of town.
I mean,
Most
the
of them
prop,
have coffee.
yeah, coffee, any of that stuff. You don't have to have it. If you give them a good piece of chicken, good steak, good hot dog, whatever it is, bratwurst, and you're there and you're saying thank you, you give them their little swag bag, you know, give them a $10 gift certificate to Scott's Strip Club, and then they can go drink there. Okay?
We give them a Brook Beer Float.
Root beer float, yeah. That's a great thing, something like that. Rick had a question.
Getting back to legitimate use of grant and aid funds.
Yes.
That's not legitimate?
So your club is a 501c4 nonprofit, and you decide you wanna be a 501c3, and you make application for it. You don't necessarily have a reason for doing this, but you have to pay the IRS, it was $850 fee just for the application, whether it's granted or not. Do you consider that a legitimate use of the grant and aid fund?
If there was a legitimate reason to go from a 4 to a 3, if you could articulate a reasonable reason,
Well, who would you have to justify it to?
the department,
To whoever asks.
The commissioner.
Whoever asks.
And did you offer one? I mean, what, where, in your opinion, is the?
well, I would be skeptical of that, because as we talked earlier, it's not taxed at so much as nonprofit. Being a C3 or C4, that's a federal tax, and what we're talking about is Minnesota nonprofits. So do you need, right? They're also a Minnesota nonprofit.
I will tell you that I did that, and I wrote the check out of grant and aid money. And there was a legitimate reason, in my opinion, for doing that, because we had a contractor that offered us the wintertime use of a skid steer for nothing. If we were a 501c3, so that particular contractor could write off the fair market value of the rental of that property.
Okay. Well, what I would do then, if you were justifying, if you were called before me judging you, how much would it cost to buy or rent the equipment as opposed to?
Well, I would say conservatively, we probably got $5,000 worth of rental free for, once we were granted that C3 status.
Okay, I'm the judge, of course, but here you guys are the jury. Do we get away with that?
Yes,
Is it
it's saving
reasonable and
money.
necessary?
Reasonable.
Is it reasonable to construct or maintain the trail?
Absolutely. In this case,
So is
maintain, not
Are you
construct.
gonna get other people to donate for later in years to keep that classification?
Yeah, it may be a bad business. You can make dumb decisions to a point. You know, you don't have to be perfect, but they're gonna look at the big stuff. They probably won't look at an $850 tax issue, but that's a reasonable explanation. I think, Rick, you convinced us. Congratulations. And if you convince this table up here, it's all downhill with the DNR. They're easy compared to these guys. Okay, other questions? Let's see, Terry, then Bill.
You're 2 minutes into Scott's time, so if Scott don't care, we can keep.
We're going all right. Time flies. Now, does anyone remember Monty Python?
Oh, yeah.
And
Search
now
it
for
over.
something completely
Oh,
different,
yeah.
our president-elect.
One question,
I thought the crazy one.
is the whole system set up that the club makes back every dime they need to pay for all of this?
No. No, it is not. The system anticipates volunteer contributions through that. And I believe there's a percentage I saw, which is at what, 25%, 75%?
I thought it was 30%.
I thought it was 25, but 30,
So we're close.
It's, very close, that's a great question. And that goes back to what I said earlier, do you wanna pay everybody to construct your trail? Well, you're using up all your money there.
Yeah.
And then how are you gonna maintain it? So, be prudent,
We give each.
benchmark to benchmark, year to year. And not only will you never have to think about this subject again, you will always live within the four corners of the law, and your club will be a better club.
You know, if you're in.
That's all I've got. Somebody else had a question? Bill, you had a question?
Well, all this discussion is great, but the bottom line is, the DNR and the state will decide whether this stuff is right or wrong.
Yeah.
So, in all the audits that the DNR has done for the last umpteen years, have they ever told a club that what they spent the money on was wrong?
I believe they have. Didn't they, remind me about Jackson County.
We had an audit, DNR audit years ago, and they never really told us we spent it wrong. Her comment was, the grant aid is set up to provide you with the funds to reasonably run a trail. It's not made for you to make money.
Yeah.
And that, to me, summed everything up perfectly.
Yeah.
Jackson County, was canceled because they didn't do the work.
Yep.
They submitted grant requests and received payment, and they were not grooming, they were not putting signs in.
Right.
It wasn't how they spent the money, they were fraudulently.
And that's let me conclude, because we're just having way too much fun here, and I'm not gonna piss off the president-elect any more than I already have. Okay? It's a simple proposition if you think it that way. They give you the money, you have to do the work. And part of that work involves expenditures of money. You have to do that competently. You have to build the trail competently. That's the part of the bargain that the club has. And the state knows that at least in building and maintaining the trail, the physical trail, you're probably better than anybody else in the world at doing it. It's the bookkeeping, the money, the accountability, and sometimes, not always, the judgment.
The mood of the people doing the audit.
Yeah, and the mood of the people, and I will leave it with this, it's not only the DNR. Years ago, there was an audit of the Otter Tail County Club. And as I recall, didn't they just shut it down for a while?
Yeah,
Yes.
we went to California with all the money, we were here with the money.
Yeah, and that was a big scandal in the newspapers, and that was the legislative auditor. So there are other auditors out there that you're subject to. Okay, I'm gonna say nothing more, you can thank me for not talking. Yay.